So it probably goes without saying that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is probably the most popular group of movies ever made. As much as I love Back to the Future, the MCU is easily the most financially successful movie franchise, with over $22.5 billion in box office revenue. Holy fuck, these movies are massive. But would you believe me if I told you there was a time when I couldn't stand a majority of these movies when I flat out hated their guts? Before we get into this, I feel the need to stress a few things. I have never read a Marvel comic. I was not a fan at first. Until 2019, I couldn't care less about what I was watching at first. Take what I say up until Endgame with a grain of salt. It started in 2008 with the release of Iron Man. Let me say once again that I have never read a Marvel comic in my life. I had no idea who Tony Stark was, who Steve Rogers was, who the Hulk was, who Nick Fury was. To illustrate how little of a clue I had about anything, I thought this movie was based on the book The Iron Man, written by Ted Hughes in 1968, later adapted into The Iron Giant in 1996. This was a book I read in school about 10 years prior. I guarantee I couldn't recall a thing from that book in 2008. All it had in common was the title. The most I knew about the movie was the presence of Robert Downey Jr. I knew him from Weird Science and Tropic Thunder of all things. I saw it, I thought it was good, nothing amazing. Then again, this is coming from someone who at the same time thought Dukes of Hazzard from 2005 was one of the best movies of all time. So my movie opinions were probably not the most credible at the time. Then I met my fiancée in 2011. Her family were massive Marvel fans. Every time there was a new movie out, they dragged me along to see them, the first of them being Avengers Assemble in 2012. The first thing I saw was Black Widow kicking the asses of several Russian henchmen. Other than Tony Stark, I didn't know any of these characters. Kinda hard to enjoy when you barely know what's going on. From that point on, every 6 months or so, when a new MCU movie was released, they expressed a great deal of interest, while I usually responded with, oh fucking hell, another one. Thor The Dark World was boring, Captain America The Winter Soldier did nothing for me, Guardians of the Galaxy was fine, probably the most entertaining, Age of Ultron was boring, Ant-Man was the first time since Iron Man where I actually recognised a cast member. I knew Paul Rudd from Knocked Up, The 40-Year-Old Virgin and Role Models. I remembered thinking this was a weird career move for a comedic actor like him, but whatever. This was also the point where it finally sunk in that these movies were actually linked when I first heard Scott Lang say,
I think our first move should be calling the Avengers.
So hold on, these movies are actually connected? What the actual hell? My brain was not able to process this, and it certainly wasn't interested enough to check out all the preceding movies. That right there is when I discovered I had a problem. In May 2016, out came Captain America Civil War, or as I like to call it, Avengers 3, or just Civil War. Oh boy, this is where the shit hit the fan for me. Let me reiterate, the only one I knew properly was Tony Stark, aka Iron Man. I had very little clue about Steve Rogers, and I had absolutely no clue about Bucky Barnes. I was so confused when I watched Civil War, I had to ask my girl what the hell was going on. She explained that Bucky killed Stark's parents and Captain America was covering Bucky's ass to protect him. Okay, if that's the case, Captain America's a dick, this movie's one of the worst movies ever, and I want Stark to kick his head in. Bear in mind, I wasn't a Marvel fan at this point. I didn't know Bucky and I barely knew Steve Rogers. I just knew I wanted Stark to royally kick their asses. As far as I was concerned, this movie was Marvel's attempt to cash in on Batman vs Superman, released just a month earlier. In both superhero franchises, the two biggest stars for each company were facing off in their own movies, each released around similar times. As far as I was concerned, my logic was flawless. Looking back, my argument there really doesn't hold up that well, considering how badly Batman vs Superman bombed and how much Civil War succeeded. When it comes to solo movies, Civil War is probably the hardest one to watch without knowing any backstory. That one is very, very involved, with a lot going on. Hence my belief that it's Avengers 3 rather than Captain America 3. The movies continue to come. Doctor Strange was confusing, Guardians 2 I didn't care for, Spider-Man Homecoming was actually pretty good. I used to like Spider-Man, plus this had Tony Stark, so it's an obvious winner. Thor Ragnarok was also pretty good, Captain Marvel I never saw, and Ant-Man and the Wasp sucked after the beginning. Then I saw Avengers Infinity War. I found it boring. All I saw was 2 hours of people fighting, plus that motherfucker Steve Rogers was back. I was still thoroughly unconvinced that Marvel movies were even that great. Sure, I had seen both Deadpool movies, and they were a good laugh, probably the funniest Marvel movies out there. Fast forward a year, and Avengers Endgame is approaching. I'm not gonna lie, with the news of the record-breaking ticket pre-order numbers, a part of me wanted this movie to bomb, if for no other reason than to prove a point that these movies were painfully overrated. Boy, how wrong was I. Endgame was a phenomenal success. It soon made it to the list of the highest grossing movies of all time with the likes of Fast and Furious 7, Jurassic Park, Titanic and Avatar, and man did it speed up that list fast, eventually taking the number 1 spot, making it the most profitable movie of all time. That had me worried. If it really is that popular, maybe it is actually that good. My fiancé really wanted to see it, to see if the hype was justified. This was long after the movie was in the theaters. Eventually I said, okay, I'll watch it with you, but if we're doing this, I need to know exactly what's going on. This movie is meant to be the big finale to everything that's happened since 2008. I need to rewatch every single movie. My plan was to cover all 22 movies, Iron Man to Endgame, in 1 month before the release of Spider-Man Far From Home at the beginning of July. I was still recovering from my Simpsons marathon the previous year. 649 episodes in 6 weeks wasn't a fun idea, I still don't recommend it. And that was with a series I actually liked. What I was hoping to do was rewatch a movie series I had nothing but contempt for. My plan was to get a good understanding of the overall stories and characters leading up to Endgame, so logically the smartest thing to do would be to watch the movies in chronological order. Thankfully, AMC provided a really good guide on a chronological viewing order. Oh, you gotta be shitting me. A Captain America movie is the first one on the list. I'll say no more here. I'll just say, by the time I got to Infinity War and Endgame, I was beyond hooked. I was all ready for Thanos and what lay ahead. And man, was I not let down. I knew about Tony Stark's death, but that didn't hinder me in the slightest. By the time Endgame was over, I knew I had just watched the greatest superhero movie of all time. It was fucking epic. It was at this point I realised I am now a Marvel fan, specifically an MCU fan. These movies are incredible. Most of them are anyway. Now, unlike my Simpsons goal of rewatching the entire series before the end of 2018, I didn't actually reach my goal. I will admit, after Infinity War and Endgame, I was a tad burned out. It was one hell of a ride though. I did eventually see Spider-Man Far From Home when it came out on DVD. The villain was pretty uninteresting, it was just another person Tony Stark pissed off. If anything, he was Syndrome from The Incredibles. But it was an enjoyable movie nonetheless. That being said, it doesn't hold up as well after a second viewing. It's kind of hard to watch after the epicness that is Endgame. So in a span of 9 months, from April to December 2019, I went from despising the sight of these movies to owning all 23 of them on DVD with absolutely no regrets. What I have here are 4 collector's edition box sets containing all 3 phases of the MCU Infinity Saga, as well as posters and collectible cards for all 23 movies. Phases 1 and 2 are nearly identical in content, in which they contain 5 solo movies and an Avengers movie. Phase 3 Part 1 has 5 movies from Civil War to Thor Ragnarok. Phase 3 Part 2 has the final 6 movies of the Infinity Saga, from Black Panther to Spider-Man Far From Home. For the amount of content these box sets have, as far as I'm concerned, it's £118 of gift cards well spent. That being said, they don't have as many features as the Blu-ray box sets, but if you're just interested in the movies, you can't go wrong with these. Normally at this point, I talk about my feelings regarding the feature presentation, followed by a rating out of 5. It's 23 movies, that isn't happening, so instead, I thought I'd count off my top 10 MCU movies, accurate as of June 2020. Honourable mention goes to Avengers Assemble. This had to be one of the most ambitious movies of all time when it was released. It drags a little in places, and I do think it's a little too long, but when it's good, it's good. Number 10, Spider-Man Homecoming. Tom Holland is easily the best Spider-Man I have ever seen. You add in Tony Stark as a superhero mentor, as well as Michael Keaton as a villain, and you have a winner in my book. Number 9, Thor Ragnarok. It's a common consensus that Ragnarok is the best Thor movie, and I don't disagree. The humour works perfectly in this movie, and it never fails to entertain.
Yes! We know each other. He's a friend from work.
Number 8, Black Panther. This is a movie that wins purely on visuals alone. Wakanda looks amazing, and T'Challa is a cool main character. That's the best word to describe this movie. Cool. Academy Awards well earned. Number 7, Guardians of the Galaxy. I used to think it was okay. When I rewatched this during the summer marathon, I laughed myself silly at it. Easily one of the funniest. Easily 10 times the movie the sequel is. That one sucks. Number 6, Ant-Man. Paul Rudd is terrific as Scott Lang, but what wins me over in this movie is what I like to call perspective gags. From one angle, things look serious and intense. From another angle, you see Thomas the Tank Engine falling off the track. It doesn't matter what movie it is, I fucking love those moments. Number 5, Iron Man. Tony Stark has always been my favourite member of the Avengers, and as a starting point for both the MCU and anyone thinking about giving these movies a go, this is easily one of the best starting points, if not the best. That being said, it isn't the best Iron Man movie. Number 4, Iron Man 3. This is the movie where Robert Downey Jr. absolutely shines as Tony Stark. Sure, the idea to make the Mandarin a stupid actor may be a tad polarizing, but the humour is top notch, the action sequences are outstanding, and this movie has easily the best Tony Stark quote of all time.
Wait, you're guilt tripping me, aren't you?
I'm cold.
I can tell. You know how I can tell? Because we're connected.
Number 3, Captain America, the First Avenger. I didn't expect it. I hated Captain America before the marathon. After that marathon, I think he easily has the best solo movie in the entire franchise. I love Steve's backstory, I love the World War II aspect, I love the warm feeling I get when I see Steve return to the army base with the missing squad. Also, Hail Hydra. Sharing number 2 and the number 1 spot, we have Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. I was so sure Captain America the First Avenger was going to keep the top spot for the entire series, but once Tony spoke those iconic words, I knew there was no chance. These were the best movies in the entire series, purely for the scope of it all. I say these because, as far as I'm concerned, these movies were part 1 and part 2 of one epic, massive, emotional, action-packed movie, and must be viewed together. Sure, you need to set at least 5.5 hours aside to watch it all in one go, but those 5 hours will not go to waste. These two aren't just the best superhero movies of all time, they easily make my top 10 favourite movies. I had to think about it for a while, but eventually I had to drop Furious 7 in favour of these two. Furious 7 may have a loving tribute to Paul Walker, but I'm sorry, it just doesn't compare to what happens to Tony Stark.
And I am Iron Man.
Now, if this isn't a perfect topic for video memories, I don't know what is. All that's left to do is to give it a rating and put it in the ranking. Most of the movies are great, there's only 2, maybe 3 that I actually don't like, so I'm giving the series overall a 4 out of 5. It's really close, if it wasn't for those duds, it could be a 5. Now, if you're looking for individual ratings for each and every movie, Okay, deep breath. In order of release date: 5, 1, 3, 3, 5, 4, 5, 1, 2, 4, 2, 5, 3, 3, 1, 4, 4, 4, 5, 2, 3, 5, 3. As for the video memories ranking, I'm keeping them together. I'd like very much to put them at the top of the 4 ranking, but we do have a few bad movies here, so I'm deducting 1 space for every bad movie. That brings it down from number 10 to number 14, ahead of the Aristocats and Postman Pat's Big Video, and behind Around the World with Timon and Pumbaa, Troublesome Trucks and Down the Mine, and Pingu's Big Video. Compromises do have to be made in video memories, and hey, even the Marvel Cinematic Universe isn't perfect. Still, 14th place is not too bad in the slightest. Well, now that all these are done, are we once again done with video memories?
We'll see.